My son is a kind person. He is a man who cares deeply for people around him and the city he loves. As a child, he learned that in order for each of us to have a better life, we need to care for our community and neighbors. I came to Canada in 1951 from Holland. This is a great country, but we can do better. My son will start with kindness. He will be a decisive leader. We need Mark to get things done.
Hello and welcome back to The Source with Madison Fleischer. Today we're pleased to have our new guest, Mark Marissen, a candidate for Vancouver mayor and very accomplished political strategist. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you, Madison.
I'm very happy to have you on here, and we're going to talk everything about politics today. So maybe we'll just begin with how you got involved in politics. Where was the beginning of Mark's venture into the political sphere?
I was in grade 8, actually.
Okay.
A friend of mine, well, actually a bunch of friends of mine, got together and created a student parliament, and then I talked the principal into having us all get a run for election to be the prime minister. And that was my first time I got involved in politics, so I guess that was about 1980.
Okay.
Yeah.
So quite a few decades of experience.
42 years ago.
Oh, wow. And now we're looking at a municipal election coming up for Vancouver.
Yes.
So how many of the candidates are running currently? We have you, Ken Sim.
There's John Cooper, and there's of course the mayor, and there's a woman named Colleen Hardwick that hasn't formally announced but is talking about running, and I'm sure there will be a number of other candidates as well.
Well, that's very exciting that so many are wanting to get involved, and definitely a very interesting time for Vancouver, especially coming out of a pandemic. So you have a history of broad coalitions where you've helped deliver these strong results. Can you maybe give the viewers a little bit of an overview of your public affairs career? I know there's been many different ventures within the transportation sector, arts and culture advocacy. Maybe you could give us a bit of a rundown.
Well, I started out working. One of my first jobs, after actually working in an ice cream store, but one of the first jobs I had was the youth director of the Liberal Party. We did a lot of work back then in the early 90s, building up a strong youth organization. Then I worked for David Anderson, who was the Minister of Transport. Well, first he was Revenue, then Transportation, then Fisheries, I think, and then the Environment, or that order. My job was the BC political work that he did. He was a member of Parliament from Victoria, and he was the senior political minister for British Columbia, so I did a lot of work with him. After that, I worked with Paul Martin to become the Prime Minister of Canada. We recruited a lot of people to run for the 2004-2006 elections, where the Federal Liberal Party actually increased our number of seats. When we were losing them everywhere else in the country. And when we recruited candidates, we wanted to make sure that we found people from across the political spectrum that had really contributed to public life, but aren't necessarily that overtly partisan, but they just want to get stuff done. So we did get some great candidates that ran that election. In fact, I would say that the 2004 to 2006 period that Paul Martin was the Prime Minister, BC probably had the greatest clout in Ottawa that it's ever had. We had 5 cabinet ministers. There were a lot of major projects that got funded at the time. So I felt very, very good about that. Now, what's happening municipally today is we've had, it's been in place for quite some time, a housing crisis. Mm-hmm. We have a significant housing crisis. We have a significant, in fact, it's one of the most significant housing crises in the world. And a mayor can do a lot to address that. They can't do it alone. You've got to be able to work with federal and provincial governments. Interest rates have a big part to play in all of this.
COVID as well.
COVID has a big part to play in all of this, but the city itself has to modernize itself to welcome people that are coming here. We need to reform our zoning so that we can be a welcoming city, so that especially young families without rich parents can find a place to live in Vancouver. Right now, Surrey's accommodating them, Coquitlam's accommodating them, but Vancouver is not, and that's going to be one of the big things that I'm going to be taking on.
That's huge. Definitely. And another gap I see personally is, low-income housing, Indigenous housing, those social kind of corporations. Do you have any kind of ideas in that sector yet?
We need more housing of every kind. We people like to get really focused on one kind or another. We need housing of every kind. We need healthy socioeconomic diversity in our city. Which speaks to the fact that we need a different kind of a leadership. The problem is that the traditional left-right continuum doesn't apply to whether or not people are welcoming and interested in building the housing. There are left-wing and right-wing councillors that vote against all the housing projects because they say they have some kind of problem with them. And Greens, especially when they vote against housing projects, again, are talking about being green in a way that is quite old-fashioned.
Right.
The more that we can get people to live in Vancouver without having to drive out, an hours out to work, the better our air is going to be.
Most definitely. Yeah, and parking itself in Vancouver is extremely difficult. I mean, trying to find something that's not $20 a day is pretty much unheard of. So I think infrastructure as well. Do you have any plans for Vancouver's infrastructure and accommodating the ever-growing population?
Well, one of the things that we support is the Broadway line and making sure that it gets all the way out to UBC. Right now, it's just committed to getting to Arbutus. I've committed that I want to get shovels in the ground for building it to UBC by the end of my first term.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And more on to your first term. What would a first year of Mark for mayor look like?
Well, we would be putting a lot of work into how to reform our zoning regulations. And the other thing that we would be doing is making an emergency effort at tackling our permitting crisis. Right now, it takes way too long to build things. And it might not have made as much of a difference 20, 30 years ago, but time is money. And these delays have sometimes, I'd say, just as a rough figure, added $50,000 to $100,000 to the cost of a condo. And that has to change.
Most definitely. Especially for, university students, young families trying to break into the market, which is unheard of at this point. I mean, even here in Surrey, a year ago, properties may have been in the 700,000 range. Now you're seeing townhouses sell for 1.6 million in those same neighborhoods. So you can imagine that Vancouver is even more so in those numbers. Now, Mark, if you could describe your leadership style or what a Mark for mayor would be in 3 adjectives, what exactly would you choose?
One word I choose is welcoming. We need to be welcoming of people from all walks of life. There's going to be a lot of immigrants coming into Canada over the next 10 years. And we need to especially be welcoming to young families that don't have rich parents. Another one would be progressive. And when I say progressive, I don't mean in the sense that some people, when they hear the word progressive, they think that you try to divide people between left and right. I'm just talking about delivering on the progress. And that's something that we haven't been doing for some time. The other one is driven. We've got to get things done. And we've got to work with whoever we need to work with in order to get that done.
And on that note of driven, leaders that are in this position now have such a crucial task of tackling the opioid crisis that's going on in Vancouver. Where is your head at for that?
Well, the opioid, the drug poisoning crisis is a very, very big deal. And it's more people have died from the opioid crisis than have died from COVID. And we need to treat the opioid crisis as seriously as we've treated COVID, and that hasn't happened. One of the things that the mayor needs to do is be able to work really effectively with the federal and provincial governments, because they all have different roles to play in this thing. But if we can get to the point where we're treating mental health like we do treat physical health, then we can make a lot of progress.
Most definitely. Preventative care rather than reactive care.
Yeah.
On the note of small business, I find that it's so overlooked when it comes to policy. And what exactly can municipal leaders, hopefully like yourself, do for small businesses, especially in a post-pandemic as we're kind of exiting that light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, one of the ways is through permitting. Again, a lot of the business permits are costing businesses way too much time and money. That's a big one. Another one is to sort of think more creatively about how we do our development on arterial roads. And there may be more arterial roads that we would want to just save for the local businesses that are there, and build more development a block in or on non-arterial roads, so that more sort of basically long-standing local businesses can don't have to compete for the land values with the big condos.
Mm-hmm. And as far as what your big vision kind of consists of for Vancouver, do you see yourself achieving that in, say, a one-year term, or is this more of a long-term effort? How would you describe that?
Well, let's first work on getting elected.
Yep.
And I do think that this is a critical time in our history. We've wasted 4 years with Kennedy Stewart. A lot of the things that he talked about in the 2018 election, were good things to do. Mm-hmm. He hasn't done them. So we are behind, we're quite behind in where we need to go, but we're going to try to get as much done as we can in the 4 years should I get elected.
Most definitely. And our last question for you today is, are you really the dishwasher at your house?
I do quite a bit of dishwashing myself. I'm not as good at it as others.
Okay.
I use the dishwasher more because that gets it cleaner. No, I do my share of my dishes.
Well, that also parlays kind of into politics, as far as, a mayor themselves cannot complete everything. They need the support of councillors, right? So we need those
I'm not
dishwashers.
asking any councillors to do any of my dishes. I would never suggest such a thing.
No.
But yes, I do my dishes. I may not have been as timely as I should have been in the past, but I'm quite good at it now.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Mark. It's been a pleasure to have you, and we can't wait to follow the municipal race and hopefully see you elected. So you're welcome back at the studio anytime.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
People inspire me every day. Students, entrepreneurs, artists, seniors, young families. They're why I'm running for mayor. Families can't afford Kennedy Stewart's Vancouver. It's harder to find a home, harder to get around, harder to make new friends, harder to make ends meet. People are being forced out of Vancouver because of our growing housing shortage. Kennedy Stewart helped Surrey and Langley secure a SkyTrain extension without negotiating an extra cent for Vancouver or getting a commitment for the subway to UBC. And Vancouverites are being left behind by his do-nothing government that is all talk, no action. We can't afford 4 more years of inaction. Kennedy Stewart isn't working for Vancouver. I'll work hard for you every day. I'll work to build compact, walkable neighborhoods and use city-owned land to build affordable housing. I'll work to make downtown more family-friendly, fun and vibrant by investing in arts and culture and making Granville Street an all-weather protected, well-lit, pedestrian-only street. And just like I was part of the team that secured funding for the Canada Line, I'll get a commitment to secure SkyTrain to UBC and commit to having shovels in the ground by the end of my first term. Better is possible if we choose progress. Progress on good, affordable homes, progress on new transit and infrastructure, progress on being a creative capital and a vibrant city full of energy that welcomes people from all walks of life. Leadership for real change is on the ballot. I'm Mark Marissen for Progress for Vancouver.